To talk a little bit about those four types of questions, which are the goals and target audience, the content, the design, and ultimately the distribution of your advertisement. And we'll talk about these individually and fairly quickly. So, for example, it's important, perhaps more than anything else, to know the goals and the target audience for your client and the product or service that they're offering. And so you want to know as much as you can about the primary audience that your client is trying to reach. Maybe that audience is elderly women. Maybe that audience is preschool children. Maybe that audience is college students. But you want to learn as much as you can about their primary audience. You also want to learn about some of the goals for their advertisement that you are tasked with creating as a designer, both immediate goals and, if they have any, some long-term goals for the advertisement as well. I find one of the most helpful techniques that you can do when you're interviewing a client, because for every client that's totally sure what they want in an advertisement, there are countless other clients out there that really aren't sure exactly what they're looking for, and they may need you as a designer to help them with an overall marketing plan. And so one of the questions that I would like you to ask most every client that you're dealing with is to get a few adjectives about how your client wants their target audience to perceive their product or service. And so they might say that it's easy to use, that it's cutting edge, that it's fast, it's sleek, it's hip, it's tasty, it's whatever. Play that adjective game with them. And ultimately, it's important to find out as much as you can about the overall product or service you are advertising. It would be hard to make, for example, a poster for a movie that you hadn't at least seen the trailer for. It would be difficult to design some marketing for a restaurant that you had no prior experience to. So you want to learn as much as you can about the product or service, and so that way you can be an informed designer. And that includes some things like maybe knowing who the primary competition is and what the single most important point your client wants to convey with their advertisement. The second category of questions that you may want to ask your client is what we call the content category from Adobe. And you might have a client that has some content that they want to reuse in the advertisement that you're making. Maybe they have a brochure, a poster, a website, an advertisement that has a certain color scheme, a certain logo, a certain photo, a certain block of text, a slogan that they want to reuse in your design. You also want to ask your client to give you some selling points of an advertisement for a similar product that they thought was successful. And ultimately, you're trying to see if they have any kind of pre-existing content that they need placed in that advertisement. What's the must for that advertisement? So maybe it's a logo, maybe it's a block of text. Does that client have anything they're giving you that has to go on that advertisement? For example, a lot of clients will want some kind of contact information. That might be a website, that might be a social media handle, but some kind of contact information is pretty standard when you're asking your client content questions. The third type of content, let me try that again. The third type of question you want to ask your client are design questions. And when you're taking this class, this is the kind of question category that you're most expecting. And so this is Or you might ask your client, are there certain colors, fonts, graphics, or logos to be included? So for example, if you're working for the University of the Cumberlands, do you need to include UC red and UC blue? Do you need to include the university seal or the university logo in the design? Sometimes you will ask a client, are there colors or fonts that they like? And sometimes that's difficult for people. Some people think a lot about color and typography. Some people really don't give it much thought at all. So what's sometimes more helpful to people is to ask them, are there colors or fonts that they don't want to use? So maybe they're open to anything other than a really fancy script font, and maybe they're really anti the color blue. Maybe it makes them sad or something. And so a lot of times people can eliminate certain style choices, fonts, graphics, colors, more than they can recommend them. It might be helpful to ask your client, are there certain advertisements that they like? And you might kind of need to lead them through describing some design elements they like, about how things are organized on a page, or how the overall fonts and colors work with the layout and other design elements. You might also want to ask them the content of advertisements that they like. Do they feature only the product or service itself, or perhaps people using the product or engaging in the service, or other types of content? You know, what do they want to see in your poster, in your advertisement? What are they looking for? You know, if you're tasked with creating a poster for a new smartphone, do you want just the smartphone to be featured in the poster, the flyer, the magazine ad? Or do you want photos of people using that product? You know, smiling faces, that sort of thing. So you want to try to get as many design choices as you can during the interview process. And some clients may not really have strong opinions about this until they see the drafts that you submitted them. And that's okay. But it's important to narrow down your focus by asking them design questions as best you can. And then finally, you're going to think about asking them distribution questions. How will this advertisement be distributed? If you're making a flyer for this class, and you will, you might ask, where does this flyer end up? Where is this going to be distributed? Where might I see this flyer? On campus? In town? Downtown? Is it going to be handed to students? Is it going to be on everybody's dorm room door? And then beyond that, you want to ask things like size requirements and dimensions. So is it 8.5 by 11 inches? Is it 11 by 14 inches? Is it something that's going to be only in print? Is it something that's going to be distributed digitally in an email, or something that's going to show up and need to be Instagram friendly? Do there need to be alternate versions that perhaps needed to be created for video and video resolution? Knowing how the ad is going to be used is maybe not the most important part of your design, but making sure that your dimensions are correct are really important, because that will obviously affect how useful your finished product is to your client when you're done. Now, beyond those 4 different types of questions, goals and target audience, content, design, and distribution, just a couple other quick tips that I want to pass along to you. You want to always be kind and gracious, I think, to anyone, but certainly to your client. And thank them for their time. I think that can go a long way. And also encourage them to reach out to you if they think of any new ideas, things they want you to try or experiment with. If they have an idea, encourage them to contact you. Also, obviously, you want to make sure and get their contact information along the way. And you can hopefully kind of engage in a dialogue as you go throughout this creative process. With that being said, I hope these tips give you just a handful of ideas to think about as you prepare to interview clients in graphic design.